Look at the father's hand, resting on his son's shoulder. Gentle, protective, the pose of a loving father. That's what everyone saw when they looked at this photograph. A successful man, a beautiful family, a moment of tenderness captured forever. For 130 years, this image hung in collections. It passed through estate sales. It sat in archives gathering dust. Thousands of people looked at it. Art historians, collectors, researchers, nobody noticed anything wrong. Nobody saw what was hiding in plain sight, until someone finally looked at his shadow. See that on the wall behind him? That's his shadow, cast by the afternoon sun onto the stone of his mansion. But something's wrong, something that changes everything about this photograph. Look at his arm in the shadow. It's not resting on the boy's shoulder, it's raised, high, at striking height. And his hand isn't open, it's not relaxed, it's a fist, clenched tight. The shadow shows what he was really doing in this photograph. The shadow shows the truth that someone tried to hide. Someone painted over the original photograph. They changed his arm position. They made violence look like love. They were careful, they were professional, they fixed everything they could see, almost everything. They forgot to fix the shadow. And that shadow has been telling the truth for 130 years, screaming it, actually. But nobody was listening, nobody thought to look. Now look at the boy, see how he's not looking at the camera? He's the only one who isn't. Everyone else faces the lens directly, not him. His shoulders are hunched, his body is tense. His muscles are tight, he's bracing. He knows what's coming, he's watching that arm. 3 months after this photograph was taken, this boy was found dead at the bottom of a staircase. He was 7 years old. The official cause? An accident. What you're about to discover is a story of abuse, cover-up, and a shadow that refused to lie. For 130 years, this boy's silent scream went completely unheard. His truth was painted over. His evidence was hidden. His story was erased. By minute 6, you'll see exactly what the shadow reveals. By minute 14, you'll know what really happened to this child. And by minute 22, you'll understand why this wealthy family fled America and never came back. The shadow remembered what they tried to erase. The shadow kept his secret when no one else would. Let me show you everything it kept hidden. Let me show you what they never wanted anyone to see. Chicago, 1892. The heart of the Gilded Age. A time when the richest men in America had more power than most kings, more influence than most governments. No income tax to drain their fortunes, no labor laws to protect workers, no real consequences for anything they did behind closed doors. If you had enough money, you could make almost anything disappear. Problems, people, evidence, truth itself. This was a city built on extremes, towering mansions next to crowded slums, massive fortunes built on railroads, steel, and industry. The wealthy lived in palaces that cost more than most people would earn in 100 lifetimes. They threw parties that made headlines across the country. They sat on charity boards during the day and broke laws at night. They attended church committees on Sunday and crushed their enemies on Monday. They were untouchable. They were invincible. They answered to no one but themselves. This family was one of Chicago's finest. Look at them. Father, mother, 3 children, the picture of American success. The father had built his fortune in the years after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. While others watched everything they owned burn to ash, he saw opportunity. While others wept, he calculated. He bought property cheap from desperate sellers, invested in railroads during the Reconstruction boom, made connections with the right politicians, joined the right clubs. Married into the right family. By 1892, he was one of the city's elite. His name appeared in society pages. His opinion mattered. He sat in the front pew at church every Sunday. He was a pillar of the community, a model citizen, a great man. Look at him in this photograph. Everything about this man screams power. The finest tailored suit money could buy, custom-made, perfect fit. A gold pocket watch chain gleaming against dark fabric, worth more than most factory workers earned in an entire year. He's positioned at the center of the photograph, standing on the highest step, dominant, controlling, taking up space. His hand rests on his youngest son's shoulder, the picture of a protective father, the image of paternal love. At least that's what everyone was supposed to see. That's what the photograph was designed to show. But photographs don't always tell the whole truth. Sometimes they hide it. His wife came from old money, Philadelphia society, blue blood. She'd been raised in privilege and married into more privilege. She organized charity events, raised funds for orphanages, hosted galas for the less fortunate. But look at her expression in this photograph. Really look. Her face is distant, withdrawn. Her eyes won't meet the camera. She's turned slightly away from her husband. Even in a posed photograph designed to show family unity, she can't hide her discomfort. She can't fake happiness convincingly enough. The eldest son stands apart from his siblings. He mimics his father's stern posture, learning the family trade, becoming what he's been taught to become. The daughter forces a smile, but her eyes tell a different story. They're tired, wary, and then there's the youngest, the only one not looking at the camera, the only one who seems aware of something else happening. Thousands of wealthy families posed exactly like this during the Gilded Age. Father at center, hand on heir's shoulder, a symbol of protection, of legacy, of love passed from generation to generation. For 130 years, everyone who looked at this photograph saw exactly what they were supposed to see. A successful man, a beautiful family, a picture-perfect moment frozen in time. Nothing unusual, nothing concerning, nothing wrong. Until 2021, when a photograph restoration expert was hired to preserve this aging glass plate negative. She'd worked on thousands of Victorian photographs over her career. She knew every technique, every quirk, every common flaw. She knew what normal looked like, and something about this photograph wasn't normal. The brushstrokes around the father's arm didn't match the rest of the image. The texture was different. The aging was different. Someone had changed something. Someone had hidden something. And when she finally looked at the shadow on the wall behind him, she understood exactly what they'd been hiding for 130 years. Let me show you exactly what she found. I want you to see this the same way she did. Step by step, detail by detail, evidence by evidence. First, forget everything else in this photograph. Forget the family, forget the mansion, forget the fancy clothes and the staged poses. Focus only on one thing, the shadow. Look at the wall behind the family. It's the exterior of their mansion. Stone blocks, solid, weathered, a perfect surface for casting shadows. In 1892, photographers loved shooting outdoors because natural light created clear, crisp images. No need for expensive flash equipment. No need for long indoor exposures. Just position your subjects in the sun and let nature do the work. But natural light also creates something else. Something you can't control, something you can't pose, shadows. And here's the thing about shadows that most people don't think about. Shadows can't lie. Shadows can't be directed. Shadows can't be told to smile or stand up straight or look at the camera. Shadows just show what's actually there. They're physics, pure and simple. Light hits an object and creates a dark shape on the surface behind it. That shape matches the object exactly. It has to. There's no other option. There's the father's shadow. Can you see it? Cast on the stone wall behind him. A dark silhouette against the light gray stone. Now look carefully at the shape. Look at his head. His shoulders, his torso, everything matches his physical position perfectly. The shadow looks exactly like it should. The proportions are right. The angles are right. Everything lines up, except for one thing, his arm. Look at his arm in the shadow. Really look at it. Take your time. In the actual photograph, in the image everyone sees, his arm is pointing downward at about a 45-degree angle. His hand is resting gently on his son's shoulder. Open palm, relaxed fingers, the gesture of a loving father, protective, supportive, kind. But in the shadow, his arm is raised, high about 70 degrees from his body, almost horizontal, and his hand isn't open and relaxed. It's not resting on anything. It's clenched, tight. That's not the shadow of a hand resting on a shoulder. That's the shadow of a fist raised to strike, a fist about to hit something, someone, a 7-year-old boy standing directly beneath it. Compare them side by side. On one side, what everyone sees when they look at this photograph. A gentle, protective pose, 45 degrees, hand open, loving. On the other side, what the shadow reveals, arm raised, 70 degrees, fist clenched, violent. These two images are from the same photograph, taken at the same moment, of the same person, by the same camera, in the same light. And they show two completely different poses, two completely different stories, two completely different fathers. That's physically impossible, unless something changed after the photograph was taken. Shadows don't lie, they can't. They're just light and physics. When light hits an object, it casts a shadow that matches the object's exact position. There's no trick. There's no illusion. There's no way for a shadow to show something different from the body that's casting it. The laws of physics don't allow it. The universe doesn't work that way. Unless the body in the photograph isn't in its original position anymore. Unless someone moved it. Unless someone changed the photograph after it was taken. Unless someone painted over what was really there. Unless the shadow is showing us the original truth and someone covered up what we were supposed to see. The shadow shows the original pose. The pose that was actually captured when the shutter opened in the spring of 1892. The real moment. The true image. Someone changed the father's arm position in the photograph itself. They took a brush. They mixed their paints. They carefully, stroke by stroke, painted over his raised arm, his clenched fist, his violent pose, and they replaced it with a gentle hand resting on his son's shoulder, a loving gesture, a protective father. But they forgot to change the shadow. For 130 years, the shadow has been telling the truth while the photograph has been lying. The shadow has been screaming the truth while everyone looked at the painted lie. And suddenly everything else in this photograph makes sense. Look at the boy. Really look at him now. Look at him knowing what the shadow reveals. His shoulders aren't just relaxed, they're hunched, pulled up toward his ears, protective, defensive. His body isn't just still, it's tense, rigid, bracing for impact. And he's not looking at the camera. Everyone else is staring directly at the lens. That's what you do when you pose for a portrait. You look at the camera, but not him. He's the only one looking away. Why? Because he's watching his father's arm. He's watching the hand that's about to strike him. He's measuring the distance, calculating when the blow will land, preparing for the pain he knows is coming. This wasn't a family portrait. This was a photograph taken during an actual moment of abuse. A father about to hit his 7-year-old son, captured forever on glass, frozen in time, and then covered up to protect a monster, painted over to hide the evidence, altered to rewrite history. But here's what makes this so much worse. Someone saw this photograph. Someone looked at the original image right after it was developed. Someone knew exactly what it showed, and they deliberately hid the evidence. They chose to protect the father. They chose to silence the truth. The question is, who did it and why, and what happened to the boy? In 2021, a photograph restoration expert was hired to digitize and preserve this aging glass plate negative. It had traveled through the world for over a century. Estate sales in Chicago, private collections in New York, historical archives in Boston. Just another Victorian family portrait. Interesting but not remarkable. A routine preservation job. Scan the old photo, clean up any damage, protect the image for future generations. The kind of work that happens in archives every single day. But this expert had been doing this work for over 20 years. She'd seen every kind of damage, every kind of deterioration, every kind of flaw that time inflicts on old photographs. She knew what normal looked like. And something about this photograph wasn't normal. Something was wrong. The brushstrokes around the father's right arm were different from the rest of the photograph. Slightly different texture, slightly different sheen, slightly different age. The kind of difference that's invisible to the naked eye. The kind of difference that most people would never notice in 1,000 years of looking, but obvious to someone who knows what they're looking for. Obvious to an expert who has spent decades studying these exact details. She'd seen this before. Hand-painted corrections were common in Victorian photography. Photographers would fix minor flaws after developing the image. A wrinkle in clothing that looked unflattering. A stray hair that ruined the composition. A closed eye at the wrong moment. Small fixes, cosmetic changes. But this was different. This wasn't fixing a small flaw. This was covering something much larger, something important, something that someone desperately wanted to hide. She put the photograph under X-ray imaging, the same technology used to examine old master paintings in major museums. The same process that reveals hidden sketches underneath famous artworks. X-rays can see through paint. They can show what's been covered up. They can reveal what lies beneath the surface. They can expose secrets that have been hidden for centuries. And what she found underneath this photograph changed everything we thought we knew about this family. Everything we thought this image represented. Everything we believed about this moment frozen in time. 2 layers, 2 completely different images on the same photograph. The X-ray revealed the original image underneath, the photograph exactly as it was captured in 1892. The true moment, the real pose, and on top of that a painted correction, a careful, professional alteration. Someone had taken a brush and oil-based pigments, the same materials used by portrait painters of the era, and carefully, professionally painted over the original pose. Layer by layer, brushstroke by brushstroke, blending the edges seamlessly, matching the tones perfectly, turning one image into something completely different, transforming one truth into another lie. The original image, the one hidden under the paint, showed the father with his arm raised high, fist clenched tight, the unmistakable pose of someone about to strike, about to hit, about to hurt, the pose of violence, the pose of abuse, the pose of a monster. The correction, the one everyone has seen for 130 years, showed the arm lowered to a gentle angle, hand open and relaxed, resting protectively on his son's shoulder. The pose of love, the pose of fatherhood, the pose of protection. Violence transformed into love, abuse transformed into affection, A monster transformed into a father. With nothing but paint and patience, someone had rewritten what this photograph showed. They had erased the evidence of a crime. They had hidden proof of abuse. They had protected a man who was hurting his own child. Paint analysis confirmed the alteration was done within days of the original photograph being taken. Same era pigments, same binding materials, same painting techniques common to 1890s Chicago. This wasn't some later attempt to hide family secrets. This wasn't a descendant trying to protect their ancestors' reputation decades later. This was an immediate cover-up. Someone saw this photograph right after it was developed, maybe the same day, and knew it could never be shown to anyone. They had to act fast. They had to fix it before anyone else could see what the camera had captured. They had to bury the truth before it could speak. They were thorough. They were skilled. Whoever did this was a professional, probably hired by the family. Possibly the photographer himself paid extra to fix his own work. They repainted the entire arm area. They blended it seamlessly with the rest of the image. The colors matched, the lighting matched, the texture matched. It was nearly perfect, nearly flawless, nearly undetectable. Nearly because they forgot one thing, the shadow on the wall behind him, the shadow that shows the original pose, the shadow that matches the X-ray perfectly. They fixed the body. They forgot the shadow. And that one oversight, that single mistake, would expose the truth 130 years later. One shadow, one mistake, 130 years of waiting. So now we know what this photograph really captured. A violent father raising his fist to strike. A cowering child bracing for the blow. An act of abuse frozen in time by a camera. And a deliberate cover-up designed to hide the evidence, to protect the abuser, to silence the victim. But there's one more piece to this story. The most devastating piece of all. The detail that changes everything. The truth that makes this more than just a hidden photograph. 3 months after this photograph was taken, the 7-year-old boy standing under his father's raised fist was found dead. His body was discovered at the bottom of the main staircase, and the official cause of death, an accident. To understand what really happened to this boy, you need to understand the world he lived in, the society that allowed this to happen, the system that protected his father and failed him completely. Chicago in 1892 was a city of incredible contradictions, stunning beauty and terrible darkness, massive wealth and crushing poverty, opportunity and oppression, all existing side by side. On one hand, it was the fastest-growing city in America. Innovation everywhere, industry booming, opportunity for anyone willing to work hard enough. On the other hand, it was a city where money meant everything, where the powerful answered to no one, where what happened behind closed doors stayed behind closed doors, especially if you were rich enough to keep it there. Just 20 years earlier, the Great Chicago Fire had burned the city to the ground. October 1871, the most destructive fire in American history at that time. Over 300 people dead, 100,000 left homeless in a single night, 3 square miles of buildings reduced to smoldering ash, entire neighborhoods erased, fortunes destroyed, lives shattered. But from that destruction came opportunity, terrible, ruthless opportunity. Men with money and ambition descended on the ruins like vultures. They bought land cheap from desperate survivors who had lost everything. They built new structures on the ashes of the old. They invested in railroads and industry during the Reconstruction boom, and they became impossibly, obscenely wealthy in the process. The father in this photograph was one of those men. While others lost everything in the fire, he saw opportunity. While families wept over the graves of their loved ones, he calculated profit margins. He bought property at rock-bottom prices from people too devastated to negotiate. He invested in railroads during the Reconstruction boom when everyone needed building materials transported. He made the right connections, joined the right clubs, married into the right family, attended the right churches. By 1892, he was one of Chicago's elite. His name appeared in the society pages. Politicians sought his endorsement. Businessmen begged for his investment. He sat on charity boards during the day. He made decisions that affected thousands of workers. He hosted parties in his mansion that everyone wanted to attend. To the outside world, he was a pillar of the community, a self-made success story, a man to be admired, respected, and envied. The mansion in this photograph tells you everything you need to know about his status. Look at it. Really look at the background of this image. Romanesque revival architecture, the most prestigious style of the era, stone columns, stained glass windows, iron railings with custom scrollwork, heavy oak doors, a property valued at over $200,000 in 1892. That's more than $6 million in today's money. This wasn't just a house. It was a statement, a monument to power, a fortress of wealth, a message to everyone who walked by: the man who lives here is important. The man who lives here is untouchable. The man who lives here answers to no one. Everyone in Chicago knew that mansion. Everyone knew not to cross the family who lived inside. His wife came from old money, Philadelphia society, old blue blood families. She'd been raised in privilege and married into more privilege. She organized charity events, raised funds for orphanages, hosted galas for hospitals and schools. The irony of that would become devastating later. A woman who raised money for orphans while her own son suffered in silence. But look at her in this photograph. Really look. Her expression is distant, withdrawn, absent. Her eyes won't meet the camera. She's turned slightly away from her husband. Her body language screams discomfort. Even in a posed photograph designed specifically to show family unity and happiness, she can't hide it. She can't pretend well enough. She knows something. She's seen something, and she's completely powerless to stop it. But behind those heavy oak doors, behind those stone walls, behind that carefully constructed public image, the truth was very different. Servants talked. They always do. Not publicly, never publicly, but in whispered conversations in the kitchen late at night, in careful words shared with friends outside the house, in warnings passed to new hires about what to expect. They told stories that never made it into the society pages, stories that never appeared in newspapers, stories about what really happened inside that mansion, stories about the youngest son, stories that still echo 130 years later. The household staff heard things at night, things they were never supposed to hear, things they learned to pretend they hadn't heard. The youngest boy crying in his room, sobbing, sometimes screaming. Muffled thuds from upstairs when the master was home. The sound of something hitting something else. Doors slamming. Raised voices, always the father's voice, always angry, followed by sudden, terrible silence. They learned to look away, to pretend they hadn't heard anything, to go about their duties as if nothing had happened, because servants who asked questions didn't stay employed for long. Servants who showed concern were dismissed. Servants who talked to anyone outside the house found themselves without references, without employment, without futures. Silence was the price of survival in that household. But they saw things too, things they couldn't unsee, things that haunted them for years afterward, bruises on the boy's arms that appeared overnight and were never explained, welts on his back visible when his shirt shifted during dinner service, a split lip that was explained away as a fall, a black eye that supposedly came from running into a door, always accidents, always explanations that didn't quite make sense. They saw a child who flinched whenever his father entered the room, who made himself as small as possible when the master was home, who had learned at 7 years old to become invisible, to take up no space, to make no sound, to attract no attention. Multiple servants later reported these observations. They remembered decades later. But in 1892, no one listened. No one could listen. A wealthy man's children were his property, his possessions, his to do with as he pleased. What happened behind closed doors was no one else's business. You have to understand the era to understand how this was allowed to happen, how a child could suffer so openly and no one could help. Spare the rod, spoil the child. That was the philosophy of the time. Physical discipline wasn't just accepted, it was expected, required, celebrated. A father who didn't physically punish his children was considered weak, permissive, failing in his duties. But there was always a line. Everyone knew it, between discipline and abuse, between correction and cruelty, between a father's firm hand and a monster's rage. The servants in that house knew the difference. They saw it every single day. They saw the fear in that boy's eyes. They heard his cries at night. They watched him disappear piece by piece. This wasn't discipline. This was something much darker, something that left bruises, something that left scars, something that eventually left a body at the bottom of a staircase. In the spring of 1892, the family decided to commission a formal portrait. It was a status symbol, common among wealthy families of the era. Hire a professional photographer with the best equipment. Pose on the steps of your mansion for all the world to see. Display your success, your unity, your perfect, happy, loving family life. They dressed in their finest clothes, custom-tailored suits, expensive dresses, the boy in a sailor suit popular for children of wealthy families. They arranged themselves carefully on the stone steps, father at center standing on the highest step, dominant, powerful, his hand on his youngest son's shoulder, the picture of a loving family. But in that single moment, in the fraction of a second that the shutter was open, the camera captured something it wasn't supposed to capture. The father's arm wasn't resting on his son's shoulder. It was raised, ready to strike. The boy wasn't looking at the camera because he was watching that hand, watching it rise, knowing what was about to happen, bracing for the impact he'd felt so many times before. And someone in that moment saw what the photograph showed. The photographer, the mother, someone, they looked at the developed image. They understood exactly what it meant, evidence, proof, a frozen moment of abuse that could destroy everything, and they made a decision that would hide the truth, bury the evidence, protect the monster, and silence a child for 130 years. Now I want you to look at this photograph one more time. But this time you know what was happening in that house. You know what those servants saw and heard. You know what the shadow reveals. You know that someone deliberately altered this image to hide the truth. Someone painted over evidence of a crime. Someone chose to protect a monster over a child. Look at it now with everything you know. Every single detail tells a different story than the one they wanted you to see. Every element reveals something they tried to hide. Start with the boy. Really look at him. Not as a Victorian child in a formal photograph, as a victim. As a 7-year-old who is living a nightmare that no one will acknowledge. He's small for his age. Thin, pale, malnourished perhaps, certainly not thriving. His expression isn't just serious. Victorian photographs often showed serious expressions because of long exposure times. People had to stay still. Smiling was difficult. But this is different. This is fear, real fear. The kind you can't pose, the kind you can't fake, the kind that comes from deep in your bones, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what's about to happen, the kind that comes from having experienced it so many times that your body prepares automatically. He's been here before. He knows this moment, and he knows there's nothing he can do to stop it. No one will help him. No one ever helps him. Look at his body. His shoulders aren't just lowered, they're hunched forward, pulled up, protective. The instinctive posture of someone expecting to be hit. His spine is curved, making himself as small as possible, taking up less space, becoming less visible, less of a target. His hands are clenched at his sides, not relaxed, not natural, gripping, tense. Every muscle in his small body is tight, bracing for impact, preparing for pain. This is what a child looks like when he's been hit so many times that his body has learned to prepare for the next blow before it even comes. This isn't a posed expression. This isn't a child who doesn't understand photography. This is survival instinct frozen in time by a camera. This is trauma made visible. This is abuse captured on glass. And his eyes, everyone else in this photograph is looking at the camera. That's what you do when you pose for a portrait. You look at the lens, you face the photographer, you present yourself, but not him. He's the only one looking away, the only one whose attention is elsewhere, the only one who seems aware that something else is happening. Because he's watching his father's arm, he can't look away from it. His eyes are tracking the threat. In that frozen moment, captured forever on glass, this 7-year-old boy is watching the hand that's about to strike him. He's measuring the distance, calculating the timing, preparing for the pain. Let that sink in. A child in a family portrait, unable to look at the camera because he's too afraid of what his father is about to do to him. Now look at the mother, distant, downcast, turned slightly away from her husband, her eyes avoiding everything. The camera, her husband, her son, she's not watching what's happening. She can't watch, not again. She's looked away so many times before. This is just one more time. How many times has she seen this? How many times has she heard her son crying in the night and done nothing? How many bruises has she pretended not to notice? In 1892, what could she do? Divorce was scandal, social death. Leaving meant losing everything, her other children, her social position, her entire identity. Wealthy men controlled everything. Their wives, their children, their households, their reputations. So she looked away. She pretended not to see. She convinced herself that this was discipline, not abuse. That children needed firm handling, that her husband knew best. And in doing so, she became complicit in her own child's suffering. She chose her comfort over his safety, her reputation over his life. The older brother stands apart from his siblings, separated, distant. He mimics his father's stern posture, arms behind his back, chin up, eyes cold. He's not protecting his younger brother. He's not concerned about what's happening. He's learning, becoming, absorbing the lessons of power and violence that his father teaches every day. He's learning that might makes right, that the strong dominate the weak, that family members can be property to control. The daughter forces a smile, but her body is leaning away from the direction of her father, subtle but visible. Even in a posed photograph, she's trying to distance herself from what's happening. She's creating space between herself and the violence she's witnessed. Everyone in this family knows, everyone sees, and no one does anything to stop it. Not the brother, not the sister, not the mother, not a single adult in this child's life. This isn't a family portrait. Look at it again with everything you know. See what it really is. This is a crime scene, the moment before impact, captured forever on glass. Frozen in time by a camera that was just supposed to take a nice family picture. The shadow shows the weapon, a raised fist ready to strike. The boy shows the victim, cowering, afraid, watching the blow coming, knowing there's no escape. The mother shows the silent witness, looking away, pretending not to see, protecting herself instead of her child. The alteration shows the cover-up, someone rewriting history to protect a monster, choosing reputation over a child's life. For 130 years, this photograph has been evidence of a crime that was never punished, evidence of abuse that was never acknowledged, evidence of a child who suffered in silence while everyone around him chose to look away. The evidence was right there, hiding in plain sight, in a shadow no one thought to examine. Someone saw this photograph. Maybe the mother, desperate to protect the family's reputation. Maybe the photographer paid extra to fix his own work. They looked at what the camera had captured. They understood exactly what it meant. Evidence, proof, a frozen moment of abuse that could destroy everything they'd built. So they made a choice: hire a painter, cover the truth, transform a raised fist into a gentle hand, transform violence into love, transform a monster into a father, erase the evidence, bury the truth, protect the abuser, abandon the child. They fixed everything: the arm position, the fist, the violent pose. They were thorough and professional, but they forgot one thing, just one thing: the shadow on the wall behind him, the shadow that shows what really happened, the shadow that has been telling the truth for 130 years while everyone looked at the painted lie. And 3 months after this photograph was taken, the boy in this image was dead. The boy who couldn't look at the camera, the boy with the hunched shoulders and the clenched fists, the boy who was watching his father's raised arm, dead at 7 years old. Fall 1892, 3 months after the portrait was taken. The leaves were turning in Chicago, the air was getting colder. The household staff was preparing for another brutal winter, another season of silence, another stretch of pretending not to see or hear what happened upstairs. In the early morning hours before dawn, the silence of the mansion was shattered by screaming. A servant making her morning rounds had found something at the bottom of the main staircase, something that would change everything, something that would finally, briefly, expose the truth that everyone had been hiding. The youngest son was lying at the bottom of the stairs. His neck was broken, his body was crumpled, cold. He was 7 years old. The same small, pale, frightened boy from the photograph, the one who couldn't look at the camera, the one with the hunched shoulders, the one standing beneath his father's raised fist, the one whose bruises the servants had noticed, the one whose cries they had heard at night. 3 months after that photograph captured his suffering, he was dead. Found at the base of a staircase he had climbed thousands of times without incident. A staircase he could navigate in complete darkness. A staircase he knew better than any room in the house. The family physician arrived within the hour, a man who had dined at the family's table many times, who depended on their patronage for his income, who knew exactly which side his bread was buttered on, who understood that wealthy clients expected certain services: discretion, cooperation, convenient conclusions. His examination was brief, cursory. He didn't look too closely, didn't ask too many questions, didn't examine the body for other injuries, for older bruises, for signs of previous trauma. His conclusion was exactly what the family needed it to be. Accidental fall? The boy must have tripped on the stairs in the dark. A tragic accident, nothing suspicious, nothing to investigate, nothing that required any further examination. The death certificate was signed before noon. Case closed before it ever opened. The newspapers printed a small notice, buried in the back pages, just a few lines. Tragic accident claims young life. Prominent family mourns loss. Beloved son. Grieving family. The kind of brief announcement that appeared regularly in that era when childhood death was far too common. No investigation needed, no questions asked. A powerful family had lost a child. The community offered its sympathies. Society matrons sent flowers. Business colleagues sent condolences. No one thought to ask questions. No one wondered why a healthy 7-year-old had suddenly fallen down stairs he'd navigated every day of his life. No one connected the dots, the bruises, the fear, the abuse, the death, all separate pieces that no one was willing to put together. But the servants knew. They'd seen the bruises that appeared overnight, heard the crying that echoed through the halls, watched a child become more and more afraid of his own father with each passing month. They knew this wasn't an accident. They knew what had really happened. Some of them tried to speak up, tried to tell someone. Anonymous tips reached the police. Whispered accusations from unnamed sources. Questions about the accident that didn't quite add up. A brief investigation was opened, probably just to satisfy procedure, to check a box, to say they'd looked into it. And just as quickly as it opened, it was closed. The family had connections, political connections, business connections, social connections. The police had pressure from above. The evidence, including a photograph that could have proven everything, had been altered. The original truth had been painted over, the shadow no one noticed. The servants were easy to dismiss, disgruntled employees, troublemakers, liars seeking attention. The truth had no champion, no one powerful enough to fight for it. The servants who had spoken up were fired immediately. Every single one who had tried to tell the truth. References denied, careers destroyed, reputations ruined. In 1892, accusing a wealthy man of killing his own son didn't make you a hero. It made you unemployable. It made you a troublemaker. It made you nothing. One by one, anyone who might have told the truth was silenced. Not through violence, through something more effective, the complete destruction of their livelihoods, their futures, their ability to survive, speak up, and you'll never work again. Everyone got the message. Everyone understood the cost of truth. But the rumors didn't stop. Society whispered. Invitations stopped arriving. Former friends looked away. The family's carefully constructed reputation began to crumble. Cracks appeared in the facade. By early 1893, just months after the boy's death, the family put the mansion up for sale, liquidated their business holdings, sold everything they couldn't carry. And in the spring of 1893, they boarded a ship to Europe. They never returned to America. They never faced justice. They never answered for what happened. They simply disappeared, taking their secrets with them, leaving behind only a grave with a name and 2 dates, and a photograph that no one knew was hiding the truth. For 130 years, the photograph moved through the world like a ghost carrying a secret. Estate sales in Chicago, private collections in New York, university archives in Boston, historical societies across the country. Each time it changed hands, someone looked at it, saw a wealthy Victorian family, noted it as an interesting artifact of the Gilded Age, and moved on without suspicion. No one examined it closely. No one questioned what they were seeing. No one noticed that the shadow didn't match the pose. No one suspected that beneath the painted surface, a different truth was waiting to be discovered. The photograph kept its secret. The shadow kept its witness, waiting for someone who would finally look closely enough to see. In 2021, a historical society acquired the photograph as part of a larger collection of Gilded Age materials. Hundreds of images from that era, family portraits, street scenes, industrial photographs, just another acquisition, just another box of old pictures to catalog and preserve. They commissioned a preservation project, standard procedure for valuable historical materials. Digitize the old glass plate negatives, clean up any damage from age and storage, protect these images for future generations. Routine work. The kind of project that happens in archives every single day across the world. Nothing special, nothing unusual, just another old photograph getting the care it deserved. The restoration expert assigned to the project had been doing this work for over 20 years. Thousands of Victorian photographs had passed through her hands. She knew every technique photographers used in that era, every type of damage that time inflicts on old materials, every quirk and flaw common to 19th century photography. She knew exactly what normal looked like. And as soon as she began examining this photograph, she knew something wasn't normal. The brushstrokes around the father's right arm were different. Different texture, different sheen, different aging pattern, subtle differences, almost invisible to an untrained eye, the kind of details that most people would never notice in a lifetime of looking. But to someone who had spent 2 decades studying these exact details, it was obvious. Someone had altered this image. Someone had painted over the original. Someone had hidden something. She ran infrared reflectography first, a technique that reveals different layers of paint and pigment. It confirmed her suspicion. There were different layers on this image, the original photograph underneath, a painted correction on top, but she needed more. She needed to see what was hidden, what someone had worked so hard to conceal. So she brought in X-ray imaging equipment, the same technology used to examine priceless paintings in major museums, to discover hidden sketches beneath masterpieces, to reveal secrets that artists never intended anyone to see. When she looked at the X-ray results, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. 2 completely different poses, 2 completely different stories, and a shadow that matched only one of them. Once she understood what the photograph showed, she began researching the family. Chicago historical records, property documents, census data, society page mentions, newspaper archives, birth records, death records. And then she found it. A death certificate from fall 1892. A 7-year-old boy. Accidental fall. 3 months after the photograph was taken. The boy who couldn't look at the camera. The boy standing under his father's raised fist. The boy with the hunched shoulders and the terrified eyes. Dead within 3 months of this image being captured. And for 130 years, the evidence of what was really happening to him had been hidden in plain sight. In a shadow no one thought to examine. In a photograph no one thought to question. Until now. Until someone finally looked closely enough. Until technology finally revealed what was hidden. Until a boy who suffered in silence finally had someone tell his story. For 130 years, this boy's truth was hidden, painted over, forgotten, buried under layers of paint and lies and silence. He couldn't speak when he was alive. What child could speak against a powerful father in 1892? Who would believe him? Who would help him? He couldn't run. Where would a 7-year-old go? He couldn't even look at the camera in his own family portrait because he was too afraid of the hand about to strike him. His whole short life was defined by fear and silence. Fear of his father, silence from everyone who should have protected him, and after his death that silence continued. For 130 years, while the photograph hung on walls and sat in archives, while people looked at it and saw a loving family, while the truth waited in the shadow. But the shadow remembered. The shadow kept his secret when no one else would, when his mother looked away, when his siblings stayed silent, when the servants were fired for speaking up, when the police closed their investigation, when the family fled the country. Through all of that, the shadow remembered. Every person who looked at this photograph for 130 years saw a loving father with his hand on his son's shoulder. They saw what they were supposed to see, what someone had painted for them to see. But the shadow showed the truth. Arm raised, fist clenched, the moment before impact. The shadow was waiting for someone to finally look closely enough, waiting for technology that could see beneath the lies, waiting to tell the world what really happened to a boy who had no one to protect him. The boy was buried in Chicago. His grave marker gives his name and the dates of his short life. Nothing else. No cause of death, no loving epitaph, no words of remembrance. Just a name that almost no one remembers and 2 dates that mean nothing to anyone passing by. He was 7 years old. He deserved protection. He got abuse. He deserved love. He got violence. He deserved a father whose hand on his shoulder meant safety. He got a monster. He deserved justice. He never got it. The father died abroad in 1901, never charged with anything. The mother died in 1908, taking her silence to the grave. The siblings scattered across Europe, their fates unknown. No one ever paid for what happened to that boy. No one was ever held accountable. But now, 130 years later, the truth is finally known. The shadow finally spoke. And the boy who couldn't look at the camera has finally been seen, not as a figure in a Victorian photograph, not as a statistic, not as a forgotten victim, as a child who suffered, as a child who deserved better, as a child who matters. Some truths refuse to stay buried, some victims refuse to be forgotten, some shadows remember what we try to erase. This was his story, hidden for 130 years, waiting to be told, finally told. If a shadow can hide a secret like this for 130 years, imagine what else might be hiding in old photographs, in the backgrounds, in the details, in the things no one thinks to examine. What other truths are waiting to be discovered? What other victims are waiting to finally be heard? What other stories are hiding in plain sight? This video reveals another Victorian photograph with a secret that took over a century to decode. When researchers finally understood what they were looking at, it made headlines around the world. The hidden message in this image will change how you see every old photograph. Click to discover what they found. If you want to discover more secrets hidden in plain sight, subscribe and turn on notifications. I find the stories that history tried to bury, the truths that were painted over and forgotten, and I make sure they're finally told. The shadows have been waiting. It's time to listen. I'll see you in the next one.